I'm Radhika, and you may have seen my college decisions, acceptances, reactions video, but since quite a few people have been asking, I thought I'd make a video about my stats and the tips and tricks that got me into colleges and specifically the Ivy League. Here were my personal stats. My next piece of advice might be a little controversial. This is my final ingredient to a standout application that most people tend to overlook. Also, in case you're curious, the shirt that I'm wearing may or may not be repping the school that I'm headed to. So if you're curious to see where I'm headed, you can follow my Instagram down below. But yeah, let's get into it. So the first thing I'll talk about are my stats, because when I was applying, I heard a lot of conflicting advice, like people saying that stats aren't everything and you don't need perfect stats. But then it was literally coming from people who had perfect 1600 SATs. So for some context, here were my personal stats. Okay, so it's the next day and I realized that there are a few things that I missed about my stats, so I'll just go through those right now. So for my background, I go to a public high school. It's not magnet or anything like that, and I'm not a legacy at any school. And yeah, so starting off with my GPA, I had a 4.0 unweighted. Yeah, I'm not too sure what my weighted GPA was, but I just generally tried to take rigorous classes throughout high school. So that's that. And then next for my AP scores, I took a total of 5 AP tests. I took AP Computer Science A, AP Psych, AP Chem, AP Calc BC, and AP Lang or APLAC, and I got 5s on all of those exams. By the way, as long as you've been doing relatively well and tried to pay attention throughout the school year, AP tests are honestly super crammable, and yeah, you can definitely cram them in the few weeks or month before your AP tests, and you should totally also be able to do very well in them, so don't be intimidated by these. My SAT score was a 1560, and yeah, that was a 790 on math and a 770 on English. My best piece of advice if you're trying to prepare for SAT tests is to do all of the practice tests that College Board has published. These are really great because you can go onto Khan Academy and find detailed explanations for basically most of the questions. And then also, if you still don't understand it, what I did was I went on YouTube a lot, and on YouTube I was able to find a lot of independent tutors who dissected all of these tests and kind of helped explain the problems I got wrong, and it's a really great free way to basically improve your SAT score. But one thing that I will say is that a lot of people say that if you just crank out a bunch of SAT tests, your score will just improve, but your score does not improve from just taking a bunch of tests, because if you're bad at test taking and you just keep repeating the same mistakes, your score is not going to change. So what really improves your score is that after every test, you need to sit down and review and analyze your mistakes, because that's really where the growth happens. So now that you know my stats, I'm going to be talking about what's way more important, which is what stats you need. So let's get into it. So generally speaking, here's my perspective. No one gets in because of their stats. I think it's a common misconception that perfect stats are a golden ticket into Ivy Leagues and top colleges, when really that's just not true. At the end of the day, the role of your stats are just to prove that you are academically prepared to go to a certain college. So using the publicly available statistics about the 25th to 75th percentile of the incoming class, you can kind of figure out what sort of stats you need. But yeah, that's really all that they're good for. So nothing more and nothing less. The second thing that I want to tackle are essays. I think when people think about essays, the first thing that they always think of is the Common App essay, the big essay. But if there's one thing that I feel is so underrated in this process, it is your supplemental essays. Guys, your supplemental essays are so important, so do not be sleeping on them. I think in all of the notes and emails from my admissions officers that I was fortunate to receive, mainly, like in all of them, the main focus that they talked about were things that I talked about in my supplemental essays, because these are where I really feel like you get to create a link between who you are and what the college has to offer. Here's a massive tip that I have to drastically reduce the amount of work that you have to do for writing supplemental essays. So go through your college list and on a spreadsheet or Google Doc, create a ginormous list of all of the supplemental essays that you will have to write. So let's say there's 50 prompts, and then categorize them based on ones that are similar. And once you do this, you'll realize that there's only a few core essays that you need to write, which you can then tailor specific to each school that you're applying to. And so rather than writing individual essays for each school, you can really easily reuse them and recycle them by just making small changes and kind of tweaking them so that they fit to each school, and that way you have to do so much less work. Okay, my next piece of advice might be a little controversial, but I'm gonna say it anyways. A lot of the advice that I heard online when I was applying said that it's a really bad idea to shotgun to a bunch of reach schools, and that you should really only be applying to the schools that you love the absolute most. Personally, that is not what I did. I applied to as many reach schools as I could and that I felt somewhat of an attachment to, and I'm gonna tell you why I did this. I think with the current state of college admissions, it's just gotten so competitive where even if you put your heart and soul, your blood, sweat, and tears into an application, they'll literally reject you, like for no reason. Like it's not even your fault, but it's just there's just so many applicants. And so if you only have 1 to 2 reach schools on your list, it is a really real reality that you might get rejected from all of them. And so to maximize your chances, I would say that if you have the means, obviously both financially and time-wise, try to kind of expand your list of reaches a little bit more, right? There's no need to go overboard. Don't apply to a school if you have zero intention of going. That's just a waste. But yeah, I would definitely challenge yourself to apply to schools even if you don't think you'll get in. For example, for me, I wasn't even about to apply to basically all of the Ivy Leagues because I wasn't really feeling too confident at the beginning, but I made the last minute decision to do so, and I am very glad that I did. Yeah. The next thing that I think is so incredibly important to talk about are teacher recommendations, because when you're really busy and caught up with schoolwork and activities, it can be really hard to remember that teacher recommendations are also something you need to keep up with. But surprisingly, teachers can tell so much about your character and who you are. But the issue is that because most people don't put in any effort into developing relationships with their teachers, their recommendations are pretty lackluster and standard. So that's not going to be you, and here's what you need to do. I always have considered myself to be someone who's pretty introverted and never really connected with my teachers, but coming into junior year, I would say that you should really try to make an active effort every few weeks or maybe every month to kind of just ask your teacher questions, get to know them, tell them about yourself. That way, just for one, you can genuinely develop relationships with your teachers. They're great mentors, but then also when it comes time for them to write your letter of recommendation, they will know you so much better because of that little amount of effort that you put in. So throughout the school year, please make sure that you're taking small steps to get to know your teachers. This last tip is for everyone who stuck around this far, and this is my final ingredient to a standout application that most people tend to overlook. So here it is, and that is how to make every single word of your application count. And so how do you do this? I feel like there's a lot of hidden spaces in the Common App, which aren't even hidden, that most people just do not take full advantage of. First off, the Common App gives you 650 words of additional info. Like that is 650 words for you to yap about anything that you want. And I feel like a lot of people tend to overlook this, but this is excellent space for you to talk about things that you were not able to mention, or to elaborate on, specific circumstances or specific hobbies that maybe you weren't able to touch on. But then also just beyond the additional info, there's so many other places to inject your personality into your application. So for example, when you're listing your activities and you're writing your activity descriptions, a lot of people tend to have similar activities, right? Like let's say swimming, piano, dance, like I don't know. And these are all wonderful activities. There's nothing wrong with them, right? But everyone kind of already knows what they are. Like you don't need to go out of your way to explain them. So rather than that, think about how you can write creative descriptions for them, right? You can maybe be a little funny, or you can, do something a little bit out of the box. This will kind of depend from person to person. But generally speaking, try to sort of think of how in every single part of your application you can really try to put forward your best self, and that will really help you stand out from other applicants. But yeah, hope this helped answer some of your guys' questions. If this was helpful to you in any way, I'd really appreciate if you could take a second to subscribe down below. So go do that. I love you forever. But yeah, best of luck to anyone who's going through this process, and just remember to take it easy, right? I know this whole process can be a lot more stressful than it needs to be, so don't add more stress onto yourself. You got this. And yeah, bye!